This afternoon, the Honorable Ministers of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation and the Honorable Minister of Works and Housing, who will make presentations, who would brief us on the memoranda they presented, which were approved by Council. I'll start on my right with the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Justice. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, distinguished members of the press. As you are aware, one of the major pillars on the basis of which the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari was built is indeed the fight against corruption, among others. In pursuance and indeed in consideration of that, in 2017, the Office of the Attorney General presented National Anti-Corruption Strategy, which was a document that was intended to provide a roadmap for collective and consensus action amongst the anti-corruption agencies of the federal government. That document was adopted in 2017, and it was meant to guide our actions and inactions as it relates to the fight against corruption from 2017 to 2022. Now, on account of the application and operation of that document, we have recorded major successes as it relates to the prevention of corruption, taking into consideration that a lot of legislations, policies were deployed, which translated into plugging the loopholes associated with corruption, and perhaps where corrupt practices are carried out, they are being transparently and accountably identified and then actions taken. So that document was a document that centered around 5 pillars. 1, prevention of corruption. 2, public engagement. 3, campaign for ethical reorientation. 4, enforcement and sanction. 5, recovery and management of proceeds of crime. So as stated, in terms of prevention, we have succeeded and made tremendous success, recorded tremendous success, to the extent that as at the time we came on board as a government, for example, only 109 convictions were recorded from the inception of major agencies of government that were saddled with the responsibility of the fight against corruption, spanning over a period of more than 10 years as at the time we came. But today, we are recording successes in terms of convictions to the extent that a single agency of government, if you take, for example, the EFCC, within a year, I'm talking of 2022, we have recorded over 3,000 convictions. So if you are looking at corruption from the perspectives of conviction, if your yardstick is to determine what successes in terms of convictions have been recorded, the yardstick is that we have succeeded of moving the convictions to the next level from the point of 109 convictions in over 10 years by previous administration to a point of over 3,000 convictions within a year by the government of President Muhammadu Buhari. And then if you are looking at it from other perspectives, for example, perspectives relating to the recovery of the looted assets, the government of President Muhammadu Buhari has succeeded in recovering around $1 billion from its inception to date. You will recall with precision that in 2017, the sum of over 300 million was indeed recovered with Switzerland, which monies were eventually deployed in the reduction of poverty, in line with the commitment of President Muhammadu Buhari, which in effect gave rise to what we had as N-Power trader money, among others, among other multiple programs that were put in place by the government of President Muhammadu Buhari. So with that in mind as a background, the National Anti-Corruption Strategy put in place is lapsing in 2022. And again, the background of the successes recorded, inclusive of the successes associated with having legislative frameworks that gave rise to Proceeds of Crime Act, that gave rise to orders like Executive Order number 6, that indeed put in place restrictions on the movement of people standing trials for high-profile cases and access to funds for them, the effective implementation of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act that saw us today now having speedy determination of high-profile cases as against a situation whereby, as at 14, there were cases that were pending for 10 years without moving an inch. We now come to the realization of the position that the anti-corruption strategy had indeed paid off in terms of its efficacy in support of the anti-corruption position of the federal government. So considering that the 2017-2022 anti-corruption strategy put in place is lapsing, the need arises for enhanced strategies. And that is what gave rise to the need among the justice sector family to come together, review what has been done, and then see what improvement needs to be put in place for the purpose of sustenance and indeed enhancing the fight against corruption posture. So today, the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation presented a council memo seeking approval of the council for the validation, adoption, and the extension of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy document from 2022 to 2026. I am happy to report that the memo was taken, deliberated upon, and eventually approved by the council, the implication of which is that we now have in place a new anti-corruption strategy policy document, which is a product of collaboration, consensus among the justice sector and law enforcement agencies. Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister of Works and Housing, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. The Ministry of Works and Housing presented one council memo and one council note. The council memo was to get approval of council for the augmentation of the contract price for the completion of the Kano Western Bypass, which was awarded to Mrs. Dantata and Sawu. We inherited this project, which had essentially not been funded in subsequent previous budget years. We are now executing it by the Sukuk. Council considered and approved the augmentation, which was for 14.095 billion, to revise the contract sum from 22 billion to 36.869 billion. Some of the items covered by the augmentation include the old amount of the VAT, the increase from 5 to 7%, the need to construct a flyover at Dawanu International Market interchange, and also the need to construct more hydraulic facilities to help drain water, especially in the parts of the road that pass through the urban centers and towns. So council approved this, and just to say that this would link the Kano-Maiduguri highway, which is also nearing completion. As some of you might know, we have completed the section from Shuarin to Azare, which is 142 kilometers. We have completed Azare to Potiskum, which is 106 kilometers. And Potiskum to Damaturu is now also substantially completed. That's 103 kilometers. What remains on that route is the Kano to Shuarin and the section from Damaturu to Maiduguri, which was halted during the peak of the Northeast insurgency. So that's the council memo. The council note relates to the section of the Enugu-Port Harcourt Road. That is section 2, the Umahia Tower to Aba, under contract to Mrs. Arab Contractors. This is about 56 kilometers. Nearing completion, that section, we had delays on the trailer park that was designed to be part of the road on the outskirts of Ngbarakuma village. So we are facing litigation by some of the community whose land was acquired for the construction of the park. So, and in order not to delay the completion of the main carriageway, we sought council's approval just to use the provision from the car park, trailer park, which is not yet ready for construction because there is no land, to use it to complete the main carriageway in order to optimize today's prices, because prices are moving. And council approved that based on the recommendation of the Bureau of Public Procurement. Thank you very much. The Minister asking me if that is also funded by Sukuk. I confirm that is also a Sukuk funded project. Thank you.
The issue of budget padding that was raised by way of a first question, I think substantially is an issue that should be targeted at the National Assembly, because the funding in its own right is indeed a function of what has been taking place at the National Assembly. But then, if you are talking of whether indeed the budget funding by the National Assembly in terms of perception is a disappointment, I agree with you that it is indeed a disappointment, and I share your sentiment that it needs to be addressed. Take a look, for example, of a project, a 5 billion naira project that is budgeted for by the federal government, meant to address a concern associated with a particular road presented to the National Assembly for appropriation by to address the appropriation demand of the Federal Ministry of Works. If that $5 billion naira project is now funded to the extent of 3 billion is taken away for other menial programs that are not indeed meant to achieve a greater good presented by the executive. The implication is, if we are budgeting that project to be completed in 1 year, taking away 3 billion out of the 2 billion, out of the 5 billion projected, will now perhaps take that project additional years for completion. So the implication is the priorities of the federal government are being undermined arising from a budget funding. So from whatever perspectives, with ever perception, with whichever perception you have in mind, budget padding, as far as the development of the nation is concerned, is indeed a serious issue that has the capacity, just like corruption, to set our development back. And I think it is indeed a great source of concern, and I share your perception in being concerned about the budget padding arrangement.
Is the government going to do something at the end of the day? Because it's not just one ministry, sir. The defense is involved, Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs is involved, 200 and something billion. So will the government do something, sir?
Well, government has been doing something about it, and certainly government is along the line looking at the better way, better approach to handle it, and those ways and means that are now looked into, that are being considered by the government, are being addressed squarely. So there was no point in time at which the government overlooked the need for doing something, but it all depends on what has to be done and at what time. But be rest assured, it is a great source of concern. Government is concerned, and government will certainly has been doing something about it, and then will, at the end of the day, consolidate on what needs to be done in that direction. Now, on the issue of poverty, how does it apply, or in fact, what we are doing in terms of policies related to reduction of poverty, as to whether I am disappointed? Well, in terms of what the government of President Muhammadu Buhari is doing for the purpose of addressing the issues of poverty, I have not in any way been disappointed. Why? Because as far as this government is concerned, the policies that were put in place to address poverty have indeed been paying off. How do I mean? The first ever major recovery in 2017 of $322 million that was made by the government of President Muhammadu Buhari was exclusively deployed in poverty reduction. And that was what gave rise eventually to what? To earn power, to what? Trader money, to what? School feeding program, to what? Public works, and then above all, a number of major policy decisions have impacted in turning things around as far as the lives of Nigerians are concerned. Take a look, for example, of the intervention relating to agricultural program. At a time when COVID set in, all other countries in the world were not exporting products. So take, for example, and take into consideration, if Nigeria as a government had not imbibed the policy of localization of production, agricultural production, what could have happened in terms of food security to Nigeria at a time when rice was not being imported from Thailand, rice was not being imported from China and indeed India. So regardless of this way and manner you look at it, the idea of disappointment as far as the policies being put in place by the government of President Muhammadu Buhari is concerned in addressing the poverty in the Nigerian situation, indeed, the idea of being disappointed does not arise. But then it is about commendation of what policies were put in place, and commendations of the how and in which way and manner those policies has translated in saving this nation from, indeed, abject poverty that could have set in and magnify and multiply if, indeed, these policies are not put in place. So what I am saying, the idea of disappointment is not there in me, but the idea of commendation is certainly there in me, as far as what the policies, as far as the policies put in place by government of President Muhammadu Buhari and their resultant effects are concerned. Thank you.
Let me take on that. I think you are missing apple with oranges. The question is very simple. And I think the Honorable Attorney General has dealt with it, which is, if you have recovered so much money from those who stole our money, how is that impacted on the poverty level? And he has given you facts and figures that the first $30 million that was recovered is what was used and is still being used for the 1 day a meal. I mean, 1 meal a day for about 10 million children today in Nigeria. It's what is being used for the farmer money, what is being used for trader money. And then part of the money recovered is what is even also being used for some of the road projects. Now, the issue of 133 million or whatever being, under poverty, I think is a completely different issue which will be addressed at the proper, the proper time. But it's something to do with the issue of fighting corruption.
Thank you very much. And just as I respond to the questions whether we plan to complete the Lagos-Ibadan, Abuja-Kano, and second Niger Bridge before end of term, the answer is yes. And I think that in another 2 hours or so, Attorney General and I are coming back here for a meeting about some of the legal issues that are arising with regards to sustaining the financing of these projects. Because clearly they are not being done and they can't be done directly from budget. So, but as we make progress, we face new challenges. So, and we were here on Monday and we resolved some issues. Contractors were here, we resolved some issues, and there are still others to resolve. So the President's office is very interested through his Chief of Staff. So we're coming back to resolve legal issues in terms of initiatives that will inject more funding into this. But just in terms of specifics, let me just tell you where we are. On Lagos-Ibadan, we have just 6 kilometers to complete between Shagamu and Lagos. And that is the last 6 kilometers into Lagos. Our plan is that we will open up, I think, about 4 kilometers out of the 6 before Christmas. By the 15th, we will announce that so that there is limited, if any at all, obstructions or diversions in and out of Lagos in preparation for the Christmas movement. So all of the diversions we will suspend and open up wherever we stop, and we will continue sometime in January. So we've met to anticipate the end of year movement, and these are some of the plans. Similarly, on Abuja to Kano, from Kano to Zaria, by the 15th, that place should be free of any diversion. And between Zaria to Kaduna, there will be about just 2 diversions. And between Abuja to Kaduna, there will be only 4 diversions. So all the rest will be opened up to facilitate end-of-year movement. Work will resume again and will continue sometime in January. On the Niger Bridge, as I have reported, we finished the bridge. What is remaining now is the approach road from the Onitsha and the Asaba end. Work is going on from the Onitsha end. The Asaba end, we just finished payment of compensation and a few other things. And then, of course, the flood made it impossible to work. Those of you who saw footage. But that has also been a blessing for us in hindsight, because we now have to redesign the level of the road by an additional 1.9 meters. Because if we had used the existing design, it may have been part of this. But the bridge has no problem. So the bridge heights are good. What we plan to do also is we're working on something by the 15th of December. You will get the full plan of how to make the new bridge open and usable for traffic to relieve the pressure of Christmas movement on a west to east only movement. And then so it's one way going, so that at least you can use it to relieve that congestion on the bridgehead. And then in the new year, we will reverse that, and then we will close back to complete the remaining work. All of those plans we will share with you. This just tells you that we're thinking ahead, we're trying to solve problems as they come, but nobody could really predict all of the challenges we have met, floods, changes in prices of building materials, construction materials, which have imposed challenges on our contractors. Or your state government, for example, is also constructing across part of our right-of-way on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. They're building a drainage channel, which is obviously needed. The question is, do we finish building the road and then wait for them to come and cut it again? Or do we tarry a while so that they finish the drainage channel and then we finish our road? So those are delays that we didn't see, and they're going to impact the delivery time, but we still think that, and we're working to ensure that this happens within the lifetime of this administration. Just a very subliminal point, which is to say that these assets that are being constructed are not being constructed because Nigerians just want to see roads and bridges. They are assets and investments in aid of the expansion and the development of the economic capacity of this country. They are assets undertaken in aid of creating wealth, in aid of creating prosperity, in aid of replacing poverty with prosperity. So even as we speak, and they are not yet finished, they are employing thousands of people, directly and indirectly. These are economic centers for many other people that you and I will never meet. One of our subcontractors on this project, as I reported during the Ministry of Information's briefing about 3 weeks ago, one of them alone employed over 1,400 subcontractors in 2020. Suppliers of diesel, all sorts of things they use in one company involved in this project. And in 2020, paid over 45 billion naira to subcontractors. That's in the Nigerian economy. So at the time we took office, the construction industry was laying off workers. And I have the data to show you. So that has changed. Of course, as we have gained here, there may be a few areas where we need to improve upon. And so this is not something to see in a wholly black or white. I think in construction industry, people are working. Quarries that have been idle for years are busy supplying materials. So it's just for us to see that, and without these projects, where will these thousands of people be? Because they can get up every morning and say, I'm going to work. And they've been doing so for years. And it is that income that puts food on the table, helps them to address the daily challenges of life. Of course. So I just thought I should make that link between infrastructure, the national economy, and there's a possibility always to do more. Thank you. Three.